Who are some of the top freshman guards in the draft that are not seen as consensus lottery picks, and just how high are their upsides? I'll tell you more coming up on Locked On NBA Big Board. What's up? My name is Richard Stayman. You might know me better as @MavsDraft on Twitter or X, whatever you call it these days, NBA Draft Film on Instagram. I do NBA draft scouting reports. That is my pride and glory. I also do community mock drafts, as well as I will be dropping a mock draft before the draft of more what I would do. I wish I had more sources to be able to tell you as much as that, but as what will happen, but that is more for some of the other top dogs in the community. But my ability to break down players' games, I really do think is at the top level. That's a little bit about me, but I don't want to make this episode about me. This whole podcast is about the listeners. This wouldn't be possible without you guys. It means a lot to me, to James, to Rafael, to Leif, that you make this your first listen of the day, even if this is dropping on a late Tuesday night. Please forgive me, but Wednesday tomorrow will be much more on time. Really appreciate you making Locked On NBA Big Board the first listen of your day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So as you can see, this episode is the Upside Freshman Guards episode. I'm going to talk about a few guys: Isaiah Collier, Jacobe Walter, Carlton Carrington, also known as Bub Carrington, Jared McCain, and Cam Christie. I tried choosing guys that weren't consensus lottery picks because we all know Rob Dillingham, Stephon Castle, Nicole Topic. He's not a freshman technically, but he is 18 still. Reed Shepard. Like, we know of these guys. We know the upside is very high with them. But what about the freshmen who have they didn't really perform all that well, whether it was context or for even guys like Cam Christie, he wasn't seen that much. And kind of the same thing with Carlton Carrington. For the first part, I'm just going to talk about, let's just dive right into Isaiah Collier. I posted a scouting report on Collier. I continue to be enamored with his game a little bit, though, where I shouldn't be, because his archetype just isn't that good. These under 6'3" guards who don't shoot well, and also like they just don't get to they don't shoot from three well, and they don't have a free throw percentage that's high, and they didn't have a great overall box plus minus. Again, I really go off of that. I do think it is valuable. That's a hard archetype to overcome. I did a query of just guys under 6'3" or less who took a decent amount of volume, as much as Collier did, but didn't shoot as well from both the 3-point line and free throw percentage. And Collier's company is not very good. None of these guys were drafted in their year, which says kind of a decent amount. Sometimes you can take away from that certain things, sometimes not. It was Nick Johnson from Arizona. If you remember him, it wasn't his draft year. Davion Mitchell in his sophomore year, so the year before he went to the draft. Then there was Isaiah Thomas at Washington. That was his freshman year. So like that one, not bad. And then Peyton Siva, who went to Louisville, and that was in his, he was around forever. I don't even know what year compared to that was. It technically says sophomore. I'm pretty sure he played more than 4 years. But he is somebody, like, that company is just not very good. And to me, like, I would see Isaiah Thomas there is a big win, and that would be an absolute dream. I'll start with the positives of what I like about Isaiah Collier, but I'll kind of make the pitch as to why I think he's a really good backup and where that slots him in to a draft position, because a top end backup, it's just not the top priority. There's a reason he's not a consensus lottery pick. So with Isaiah Collier, if you're not familiar with him, who he is, he was the number one recruit out of high school, played in the EYBL circuit. He's from Georgia, one of the top slashers in all of high school. And I don't know how much everybody who listens cares about high school or keeps up with high school, but in a way it matters. There's a reason a lot of these underperforming guys stay high because of what they did in high school. Like, it matters to some extent. They're playing against almost all of the other top 100 prospects if they're in EYBL. And if they're in Adidas or Under Armour, they're playing it against a heavy amount as well, the like top 150. So with Collier, average 16 points a game, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal and a half, 3 turnovers a game, though, 49% shooting, 34 from 3, 67 from the line. So just starting it out, again, I hinted at it, the poor shooting numbers. 34 you can kind of live with. It was I rounded it up from 33.8, but like it's 34. Not going to nitpick over 0.2%. But the 67 is what worries me. Even if it was at 70, I'd be a little bit more alarmed. He got to the line a good amount. He should have been making more. And then when I saw him at the combine, the form just doesn't look good. His jump shot really needs consistency. His mechanics just, the guide hands off. It looks like he shoots like the way I describe it is he shoots like he's 7 feet tall. And that's weird for somebody who's only 6'3". I think that's a little bit bizarre. Again, I've said this before, mechanics don't always matter. Touch matters, but he doesn't really have either. And that's a really big red flag. I don't know how good of a backup point guard or even a starting point guard you can be if you are not going to shoot the ball. There's just not many of those guys at his size that thrive in the NBA. The other thing he struggles with, short wingspan. He measured 6'2.5" with a 6'4" 3/4 wingspan, so +2. He's not really that athletic, only had 6 dunks, and most of them were in the open court in transition. Defense, the motor comes and goes on that end. I think that had more to do with the team. I don't really hold that against him personally. I think that's minor. It's really just that athleticism and frame and shooting. But there's a reason he's in the first round. And that reason is that pick and roll ball handling ability and the ability to get to the rim and finish at the rim. Fantastic slasher. He can get to his spots very easily. He's almost deceptively quick because you look at his size and a lot of those guys, they bully their way to their spots. They don't win with speed. That's not the case with Collier. He's got a good motor on offense, I would say, for the most part. There are times, again, like, I don't know how much of it had to do with USC was terrible relative to expectations. Like, for the early part of the year, I think it was mostly good. But on offense, he wants to try hard. It's the defensive end where he doesn't really go super hard. But he changes pace really well. He changes speeds. Like, he can get a big on him and he wins. Even if he's not a threat to shoot and they can sag off of the shot, he's going to win because he gets to the spot so quickly. Now, what allows him to win, I know I've been kind of all over the place here, is his soft touch at the rim. It's really impressive, just the amount of moves he has. I know bag is almost a trigger word for some people, and I know it's not the most popular thing, but with Collier, he has like that true bag where he can go, okay, reverse just straight up. He can go at guys. He can go with lots of English. He can go with spin moves into a different move where he's got the fake. He can go up and under. He can stop himself on a dime. Like, that stuff really goes a long way. And I think that's going to get him on an NBA court. And on top of that, he has outstanding floor vision. He sees the floor very well. It was hard for him. I think some of the assists could have been a lot higher if he went to a place where he was the primary point guard when he was on the floor. And instead he played with 2 other guys that were kind of point guards. He was the truest point guard of the 3, Boogie Ellis and Bronny. Bronny didn't play as much of just as many games because of the heart as Boogie Ellis. And Boogie Ellis is more shoot first than actually a point guard. So a lot of that, I think, gets hidden. Now, all of that being said, what does that amount to, right? For Collier, I think he ultimately profiles best as a top-end backup point guard. It's a good outcome. Like, I think there's a floor for him. Even with the risk, I do think there are some concerns. But my big thing is just like, okay, he's a floor general. That sticks. He also has the shooting touch near the rim where he can get floaters. He has a beautiful finger roll. Just, again, all these different ways. I could keep going on and on about his finishing ability and his ability to finish through contact with that strength and quick first step. I think he's going to stick because of that. He's going to work hard at getting the shot better. And honestly, at this point, if the shot comes along and even if he's floating a little bit below league average, it's completely fine. I will say I moved Collier down into my I don't have a first round grade for him because I do think he ends up as a backup point guard. That doesn't mean he's not going to be an NBA player. I think his floor is decent. Ceiling's not that high because it's not attainable. I think he would have to become a really good shooter, and you can't overcome the athleticism stuff like the above the rim. I just don't think he has. And that's my big red flag. So because of that, I don't think he's a lottery pick. I don't think any team is going to spend a lottery pick on him. You look at Tyus Jones, even back in 2015, didn't go lottery. If I'm not mistaken, he was in the 20s. So guys like him, and that's probably one of his best outcomes, especially after watching what he did this year in Washington. Granted, part of it was empty stats. I don't think it was his best year, but there's a case statistically for it. But like what he did with Memphis, making everybody else around him a winner, I think that's probably his best outcome. It involves shooting getting a little bit better, but you look at just how that floor general works out. I think that's his best case scenario. So I'll talk about Jacobe Walter, Carlton Carrington, Jared McCain, and Cam Christie coming up. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. Winner take all time in the NBA and NHL as both sports are in the finals, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming and the drama. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on the YouTube app or the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So like I said, I was going to talk about some of these other guys out here that are these freshman guards, right? That don't have really consensus lottery grades. I'll say Jacobe Walter is probably the best candidate to have this. Right now, I've seen him at 13 in a lot of different places. I don't know if I like that so much personally, but I do think that there is merit for it. And as someone from Dallas, I'd like to give the background of who he is. He grew into his jump shot really into his senior year at Link Academy last year. As a junior, he was more a physical force going to the rim, and then he strayed away as other guys around him matured. Physically, he would grow into more of a shooter who that became his bread and butter. So right now, the percentages weren't very good. There's really no way to sugarcoat it. He was inefficient overall. At Baylor this year, shot 37.5%, 14 points per game on 11 shots a game. Not much around the edges. 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1 steal, 0.2 blocks, 1.3 turnovers. Not that much. Again, shot 34% from 3. Not a great number for somebody who's advertised as a shooter, but he took 6 attempts per game and also had 79% from the line on good volume. So there is that to go off of. My concern with him is a lot of it's theoretical. Like, yes, he's very good at shooting off of screens. I think he'll be very good, especially hitting pull-up jumpers in the mid-range. I think that stuff is very real. The floaters, like the ability to hit jumpers is absolutely good. And I know for a fact he's a hard worker. Again, I'm from Dallas. I have connections in that just to a lot of these top high school guys. I know the work ethic is real, so I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I still don't think he goes lottery. He struggles defensively. I think he really has a hard time staying with slashers. He's easy to separate from. He's kind of soft on drives, too. If you watch, I forget which Cincinnati game it was. In my notes, I had written down that it was Cincinnati. And I want to say it was at home. There were just so many times he would go into the defense about to lower his shoulder, and he would do it very softly, like, I don't want to hurt you. So he's got to do that much stronger and be aggressive. I know he has it in him because I literally saw him do it 2 years ago. So that is something that is in his bag. I'd like to see that more. He also just isn't that athletic or explosive, I should say. And then also he looks down on drives. That's really the big thing. If he can improve vision just in general, I think his floor vision is pretty rough. A lot of times coming off the screens, he's like, oh crap, I have to shoot it. And that's not good. So ultimately, how does that factor into his draft stock? Well, he's 19, 20. He's a freshman. He's got an elite skill upside, at least, to be a great shooter, and teams can hope, hey, he was a good slasher earlier in high school. This is why high school matters, by the way, because you have the evidence of it happening. Could he do it again? And that's going to be the gamble teams take. So I think ultimately, yeah, Jacobe Walter, he'll probably end up in the high teens. I don't think he goes lottery, though. I think he's going to be one of the very first picks outside of the lottery. The next one is probably one of the biggest risers. And I actually think if you were to put a poll of who's the most likely of the 5 players here. There's Cam Christie, Jared McCain. We haven't talked about them yet. Carlton Carrington and Jacobe Walter and Isaiah Collier. Who is the most likely lottery pick? I would actually say Carrington. This dude tore up the combine. Every shooting drill, he was killing it. He didn't play. He tested well. I just think he's somebody who made himself a ton of money at the combine. He also measured super well. 6'4", with a 6'8" wingspan, with a lot of room to grow into that frame. The shot just looked incredible. He can hit really difficult shots. Now, I will say there are risks with him, but he's also super young. If you haven't seen him, I would recommend checking out the first few games of his season. He came out of the gates blazing, and a lot of teams just didn't really have an answer. Granted, the competition wasn't super great. It was against North Carolina A&T, Binghamton, Florida Gulf Coast, Jacksonville, and then he kind of had a wake-up call against Florida, but even then it was still a good game because this was his regression game. one of them. Actually, the real next one was Oregon State. But even then, he did so much more in his bad games of shooting, at least 14 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. And then in the really bad game against Oregon State, where he truly regressed, he had 5 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds, only 2 turnovers. Look, I don't mind it. It wasn't a good game, but it also wasn't something where it just looked like he melted down. His season stats, he shot 41% from the field, 32% from 3, again, 6 attempts, and then not that great of volume at the line, only 2.8 per game, so really just over 1 trip to the line a game, and he shot 78.5%. With him, I think it's just teams are going to buy into him having shooting upside. He doesn't turn 19 until a month after the draft. That's going to win a lot of people over. The shot needs to be sped up, but there is touch there. Against West Virginia, this is a lot of people at the combine was, hey, watch that game. Teams went under him, like for West Virginia, went under his screens, and they were still impacting his shot. One of them was even blocked. Like, that's kind of a red flag. I think there's some defensive concerns on ball, his reaction time and screen navigation, both of those issues. But the big test is, can he do enough without having the ball? I think ultimately I would say yes. And what skill does he need to be more than just like a G League superstar? This was on my notes a long time ago, and I kind of agree with it. But at the same time, I think he solidified himself being so young that he'll grow into a lot of these areas. Like I hinted at, rebounding and assisting, right? The defense may not ever get there. I think he might live with that if he can become a complete offensive player. I think that would be a really good outcome for him. So I also want to talk about Jared McCain here. Not just Jared McCain too, but Cam Christie. We'll get to that in just a minute, but let me tell you about BetterHelp. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. For example, I can tell you how I really truly feel about the Mavs playoffs, like them in the finals right now, and who they should draft at 58, but that's not all that's on one's mind, and you need to kind of unbiased audience all the same. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, last segment. Jared McCain. He is another guy who I feel like he's probably, if I had to rank these guys, let's just do this super fast. Most likely to be a lottery pick to least likely. I'd say number 1 is probably Carlton Carrington. A close second is Jared McCain. I would say Jacobe Walter because I think the mocks are actually onto something there. I think there's real intel. Isaiah Collier. Cam Christie, fringe first round. So he's safely last. It's no disrespect to him. At the moment, that's just where the stock is. With McCain, look, if you remember last year at Duke, Dariq Whitehead, Tyrese Proctor, Derek Lively, all these guys, they really struggled to fit in together. And because of that, all their draft stock got hurt. Dariq Whitehead had injuries, some other stuff along the way. But I think you look at Derek Lively and go, okay, Duke didn't do him any favors. Now, of course, Jared McCain is a guard, but he had to compete against also Tyrese Proctor, who was in his second year, supposed to be his big breakout year. Didn't really happen. Jeremy Roach, who is the experienced guard, and he didn't get to showcase nearly as much guard skills as he truly has. They kind of put him in an off-ball guard role where he was a shooter, he could attack closeouts, and occasionally run a few pick and rolls. Now, there are some negatives about his frame. He's 6'2" with a 6'3.5" wingspan, very short standing reach. He's going to be 21 into about the All-Star break. Next year is when he turns 21, so he's pretty old for a freshman. But he is a super fast player. Like I remember watching him at Duke this year, and I was like, wait, when did this first step come out? Like, where did this come from? Because I saw him in high school, and he was mostly a pull-up shooter who would attack quickly, but it wasn't like this blow-by ability. And I think that shined a little bit more at Duke, and I think he would have had a lot more on-ball reps to do so if the roster construction was a little bit better and the use of it. It's not anything necessarily against Duke. It's just it's hard to balance a bunch of 5 stars and high-end 4 stars. But his jump shot might be the prettiest jump shot of the entire class. Watching him at the combine, it was like, it was effortless. Like his shot is completely effortless. It's perfect mechanics. He has great touch. Problem is he's 6'2". How does that actually work for him? It's hard to say. He would really have to be a point guard. It's one of his biggest swing skills. But he can play fast. He can shoot fast. In transition, he pulls up, sets his feet lightning fast. He can handle the ball, be the transition wing guy, and he can take you out. He can win you 3-on-2s, right? Or 2-on-1s. Advantage situations in transition, he's going to win you those, especially as a jump shooter. He sets his feet extremely well. Like, that's part of the big thing. Like, just everything about his game is super fast. He also, I think, has great defensive instincts. Like, the way he reads plays before they happen is remarkable. That's going to help make up for some of that size because he's not a good on-ball one. I don't think he also just some balance issues. Saw that on tape, saw that at the combine. Really, the big question for him is, like, does the age matter? And then also, does any of the frame, how much does that end up hurting him? So I'm a little bit torn on him personally. I think in terms of star upside, I should say, because I think he's surefire NBA player. Like, his stats are very, very good. For the year, he shot 46% from the field, 41% from three on 6 attempts per game, 88.5% from the free throw line. That's the highest number of any of these 5 players. And he also had 5 rebounds a game. Like, the way one of the other things, actually, last thing before I talk about his stock a little bit, the way he reads the defense as he's going for a rebound is so impressive to me. He always looks back at his man. It's very fundamental how he is as a rebounder, and that's why he gets the ball. Like, he knows where his guy is behind him. He doesn't get snuck up on, and he knows how to do it to somebody else simultaneously. That's a really big skill for a guard, and he has that. The last one would be after Jared McCain. And actually, I didn't address his stock. I think the size is what's going to limit him. I don't think you can take a 6'2" kind of off-ball guard in the lottery. You could take him in the teens. You can't take him in the lottery. So 15 to 20, I think he'd be a great fit. Someone like Orlando, kind of an awkward fit, but they need shooting. You can figure out the fit later. Just get the skill down and you can make it work. The last player is Cam Christie. Cam Christie, the younger brother of Max Christie of the LA Lakers, went to Michigan State. Right now, he's a shooter. That's mostly what he is. I think he has really good defensive upside. It's a little bit inconsistent, but he has like the instincts and the ability, the footwork, the athleticism. It's really good. The problem with him is, what does he do when he's not shooting? Because he averaged 11 points a game. 2 assists was pretty good. I don't think his passing like popped by any means, but he did pass to a lot of makes, if that makes sense. And it wasn't, not a take away, it's just it wasn't anything super advanced in his reads. It was like making the extra pass, which is very valuable. But I like Cam Christie because that jump shot's so pure. 39% on 5.5 attempts per game, 79% from the line, 1 trip a game, also 3 rebounds a game. But a lot of those were just simple not transition rebounds, but like, everybody's getting back, and then you start running in transition sometimes. And he could run from transition and pull up super fast. But his ability to run off of screens, especially at his size, I know he was listed at 6'6". Let's see what he actually measured at. A little bit smaller, 6'4.5", but 6'8" wingspan. You can work with that. And especially, like I said, the defensive upside, I think that's super impressive. He's somebody who I would give probably a good look at the end of the first round. I think he's better than his brother personally. His brother was a better defender. Not as good of a shooter, I think. Like, he could hit open shots, but I think his shot was a lot of fool's gold. Hasn't really played with the Lakers. I think Cam Christie is somebody you look at 2 to 3 years from now, and that's when you start really saying, okay, where's the pick at? Because he's the biggest upside play of all these players. And I listed him as a guard. He's not a point guard, but he is a guard. Same thing as Jared McCain and Jacobe Walter. But I really like Cam Christie's upside. He's like the last guy I need to deep dive in, like, truly, because I've done deep dives on a lot of guys. I've done the deep dive on him, not the deep one, where I've seen like his worst game, how he looks. I'm really excited to do that. But I think with Cam Christie, you can get a really good idea with the other games I've seen where just the quickness, he comes off of handoffs and screens. Like, it was unguardable a lot of times because of how quick he would fake to the right and immediately cut and plant his feet to the left. Like, that is, at least in college and in NBA spacing, it's going to be the same thing. If you're playing against a drop big, that's unguardable. And that gets you minutes in the NBA. So eventually, maybe his upside, I'm not going to give like a lazy comp, but you can figure out who I'm hinting at here. Somebody who comes in and just shoots 3 at an extremely high level and at a lot of volume and can play on a winning team. And I'm actually just going to violate what I said 10 seconds ago. Like a Buddy Hield type. He's not Buddy Hield, actually, especially because he plays defense. But that level of offense where you look at the impact his shooting and just his shooting has, I think that's a really impactful role down the road, especially when you got a 6'5" freshman who can eventually maybe grow into more guard skills, has a high level shooting. I think it's impressive. So on this episode, I talked about Isaiah Collier, Jacobe Walter, Carlton Carrington, Jared McCain, and Cam Christie, and why all of them really should be first-round picks, and why some of them are lottery picks and why some of them aren't. Really, none of them actually, I don't think, will be a lottery pick, but some of them have that case to be it. So really appreciate everybody who continues to listen. Really excited for what we have in store for the rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.